You want to listen to a podcast?
By who?
Georgia GOP Congressman Doug Collins.
How is it?
The greatest thing I have ever heard in my whole life.
I could not believe my ears.
In this house, wherever the rules are disregarded, chaos and mob rule. It has been said today, where is bravery? I'll tell you where bravery is found and courage is found. It's found in this minority who has lived through the last year of nothing but rules being broken, people being put down, questions not being answered. And this majority say, be damned with anything else. We're going to impeach and do whatever we want to do. Why? Because we won an election. I guarantee you, one day you'll be back in the minority and it ain't gonna be that fun. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Doug Collins Podcast. It is Wednesday and lots are going on. Wanted to catch you up on the overnight developments from last night. I mean, you're not going to believe, well, let me rephrase it. Yeah, you probably will. If you followed this Congress since last January and the just the start and stops that have been going on, especially in the House of Representatives, this will not come as a shock to you. But even if it's not, it's still, you got to scratch your head on this one. And I'm going to get into the details this morning, not from a perspective of trying to, say this is right or this is right. It's just from a simple fact of there seems to be not a lot of thought going into it right now. And Speaker Johnson is enduring defeat after defeat. Sometimes, and I'm going to point out today, it seems like it is at his own choosing. And I'm not sure what to think of this. Now, it wasn't just in the House yesterday. It was in the Senate this week as well. Lots to talk about. Nicki Haley loses to none of the above. I mean, we got a lot to talk about today here on the Wednesday edition of the Doug Collins Podcast. Glad to have you with us. Right after the break, we'll dive right in. Hey, folks, when you look out and you see the country and just the disarray it is, you see the Biden administration, you see the wholesale prices have just went through the roof again. Inflation is tearing us up. If you have your finances all impinged in just a few areas, if you're just in stocks and bonds and you're not diversified, I got some news for you. You need a navigator. You need somebody to help you get to where you need to go with those finances. And I can't think of anybody better to do that than my friends at Legacy Precious Metals. You need precious metals in that portfolio. You need gold and silver. And Legacy Precious Metals, the folks there, they're the navigators. They know how to deal with tough times. They know and how to look ahead and take your personal situation and make it something that can be workable for you in the long term, because that's at the end of the day, that's the one you're most concerned about. You need to make sure that your personal finances and your retirement are secure. You need folks like Legacy Precious Metals helping you in that. They will take the time to learn you. They'll learn your finances. They'll learn where your investment goals are, and they'll help you get there. And metals and gold right now in this kind of crazy inflation, in this kind of crazy economy with the Biden's economy is just, you need that help. And Legacy Precious Metals is the one to do that. So give Legacy Precious Metals a call, 866-528-1903, 866-528-1903, or you can always visit them online at legacypminvestments.com, and you can download their free investor's guide. Legacy Precious Metals, they're the ones you need. They're the navigators to help you through these turbulent times. Hey, everybody, Mike Lindell and the MyPillow employees want to thank all of my listeners, the great Doug Collins Podcast listeners, for your continued support. To thank you, they're offering an overstocked clearance sale right now for the best price you ever use when you use the promo code Collins, COLLINS, and you get free shipping on the entire order. You get 50% off the MyPillow 2.0, the brand new flannel sheets that just arrived and won't last long. Get six-pack towel sets for only $29.98. And take advantage of the free shipping on larger items like mattresses and mattress toppers. 100% made here in the United States and on sale for as low as $99. Everything is on sale, from the brand new kitchen towels that have the same technology as the bath towels that actually absorb, dog beds, blankets, couch pillows, and much, much more. To get the best specials ever, go to the mypillow.com, and use the promo code Collins, COLLINS, or call 800-986-3994 and use the same keyword Collins, COLLINS, and get free shipping on your entire order while supplies last. MyPillow products, thank you. Y'all go check them out. All right. Where to start? I mean, this is the part that, for those regular listeners to the podcast, I'm glad you're here, because what I try and really try and do is give you the behind the scenes as best I can from being a member and saying, okay, what's going on here? I'm going to start off with just a simple statement of fact that many of you have heard me say over and over and over again. And that is that politics and governing is math. Okay. And I know some of you may not want to hear that because math is hard and you don't want to accept the facts of math. But the good part about it is political math is pretty easy. And if you start off at the county commission level and you have 5 county commissioners, there is a magic number. And I'm going to give you 2 seconds to guess. 1,002. Yep, you got it. It's 3. 3 is the magic number to get anything passed. As you progressively move up in size of legislative bodies and elections, then you will find that you will always have a number that is the pass number that the majority has to get to have something move forward. In the House of Representatives, when everybody is there, 435 members, is 218. Now, if with people out, people retiring, people not filling their seats, those numbers can drop down as members of the House are present. For example, if we lose, right now the House is down, I think, to 432, maybe somewhere in that range. So it would affect the 218, I think, down to 217 or 216, depending on who votes that day and who's not there. So irregardless of what that real number is, there is a number that you have to get to pass legislation. And in the Senate, it's 60 cloture votes to make sure a bill moves forward, unless the Senate waives those rules and tries to go, which is very rare, when they'll try to go to a majority-only position, which would be 51 or 50 plus the vice president exercising the tie vote. The other issue is you have to have a president to sign those bills, otherwise they never become law. So as we deal with this morning, I want you to keep that in the back of your mind. Now, there's sometimes you've heard of the Speaker of the House. You know roughly what the Speaker of the House does, and you probably have gleaned what a majority leader or minority leader would do. They're the leaders of the party. The majority leader, when in the House, actually sets the floor schedule. They help determine what bills will come to the floor in guidance with the Speaker and the other leadership team. Also, you have in the Senate, the majority leader also does set the agenda for the floor in consultation, of course, with the minority leader. Minority leader in the House, not as much emphasis on setting the agenda for the floor because they just don't have the power to do it. In the Senate, with that 60-vote cloture rule, McConnell does have power to help steer some of the agenda and has Schumer looking at what can get to the floor and what cannot get to the floor. Now, I say all of that just to remind you that they also have a position called the whip. Now, the whip is not what you see in House of Cards or other things where you have this person who goes behind and beats people into submission. Now, some of you may say, well, they do twist arms and everything else. Yeah, that is true. And yeah, we try to convince with any, normal means possible for the conference to stay together. But the whip's job, most importantly, is to be the chief number counter in the House. Nancy Pelosi, as Speaker, was very good at this. Steny Hoyer, as Majority Leader, was very good at this. Jim Clyburn was whip, and Jim Clyburn's office was good at this as well. Although I will say that it was the Pelosi machine and the Hoyer machine that kept the whip count in check. What that means is the whip count is who's for it and who's against it. You need to know this, especially if you have a tight margin, and this is what the House has right now. I remind you again, Nancy Pelosi had at the beginning of this Congress, she had the same majority in her last Congress as we did and passed many pieces of legislation, not losing a floor vote in a major battle because she knew how to count. I'm beginning to wonder now what is going on behind the scenes with some of these issues in the U.S. House. So let's start in the House. Yesterday was a failure day, bottom line failure. All right, now. The two issues were the impeachment of Secretary Mayorkas and the Israel aid package. In any other normal circumstance in the world, for the most part, in the past 50, 60 years of Israel's existence, this would have been an easy no-brainer, would have been happened probably back in October. They would have sent money to Israel to help them purchase the equipment that they need for the Gaza incursion, the Gaza invasion that they have did to root out the terrorists of Hamas. It's gotten tied up into a lot of infighting and other issues going on. The Speaker first put this out as an offset with IRS money and some other things that will be offset. That's a buzzword in Washington to say, okay, this money is going to be, we're not going to spend this money. We're going to spend it on this money. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes it doesn't. But that's sort of the interest is if you're going to pay one thing, you're not going to pay another. That's what the Speaker wanted to do. He passed it out of the House back in the fall. Senate refused to take it up. That's how we got into the border issue. And again, that's something the Senate just flopped on this week as well. And so we're at a point now to where you're looking at two problems in the House. Both of them were math problems yesterday. Going into this vote, the margins were tight. 3 was as much as you could lose, given the fact that Steve Scalise was out with cancer treatments and the fact of retirements of McCarthy, Bill Johnson, and the kicking out of Santos from New York. So they went into the vote anyway. What is interestingly enough now is they also knew that they had 2 who were probably going to vote against the bill to begin with. Now I'm finding out through public sources and others that there was the 3 that voted against it were all known to leadership. Mike Gallagher, Ken Buck, and Tom McClintock from California. They were on record. Gallagher has now has said, look, I whipped no on this for weeks. They knew I was going to be a no. This should not have been a surprise to them. The floor, Speaker Johnson, with nothing else going on, which, by the way, you're hearing nothing about the appropriations packages that are due in less than a month now. You're hearing nothing about negotiating on cutting spending. You're hearing nothing about that. We're dealing with impeachment of Mayorkas and a bill to then fund Israel funding without the border package that the Senate was looking at and now has flopped on. So, again, they're going to try and get 2 things through. And Tom Emmer's the whip. You just have to wonder how they didn't know they had the votes. Now, what a backstory. Here's your interesting backstory coming out of this is that Representative Green from the Democratic side was supposed to be having surgery yesterday or was supposed to have a medical procedure being done. And when the Republicans looked at the numbers, they knew that if he was not there, the understanding was that they would have enough to pass this. Late night dramatics, he comes in still in a medical garb, if you would, from being at the emergency room of the hospital, wherever he was at, and he places his vote, which throws it into a tie. This is where the whip is panicking because the numbers that they thought they had, they didn't have. And a tie vote means it's dead. So there was a lot of pressure put on Mike Gallagher to change his vote. But Mike, as he has said in public sense, and also from what we're finding out, is he's already told him he was a no. So it was not, go to the floor and change my mind. This was not, hey, I'm a yes if you need me. This was a no. So Blake Moore from Utah went no as well, which killed it, 214 to 216. And the only reason Moore did it from Utah was to preserve the right for a motion to recommit, which means that you can actually bring it back up again, even though it lost. And if someone on the no side makes the motion, they can do it. If you voted for the bill, you can't bring up the motion to recommit. So anyway, first mistake. You have a blown opportunity. You didn't read the room. The Democrats played it well from all indications by keeping Green's status as a secret from the whip count, and they got caught in a bad position, thus having to get more to vote against it so that they can bring it back up. Now, the rumor is that Steve Scalise could be in town as early as today. This was Wednesday, to do this again, or at least next week when they're in for a few days next week. Either way, the numbers could change. The numbers, could go back and forth here. You could, there could be, you could lose another Republican. You maybe keep another Republican. Who else knows? But the issue is they didn't count right. They got caught, and they lost the Mayorkas impeachment, in which is spending time, away from the other things that we've talked about, from the China investigation, from the weaponization of government investigation. All these things are going on in the background, but nobody's paying attention to. And then you have the real issues of budgets and appropriations that are going to come due in March that does not appear to be being worked on as much as you would think they would be worked on, and getting those out so that we can find a solution to, except in the leadership offices. And you still got FAA reauthorization. You still got FISA reauthorization. You still got these bills that are just piling up and not getting addressed. The other thing, that was number one problem. Number two problem came in the issue from the second vote they decided to bring forward. And that was the Israel standalone funding bill without any offsets, without anything, just straight up, here's the money, we're going to send it to Israel. This leadership team seemed to have been warned several times over the last couple of days that, one, they couldn't get it out of committee, the Rules Committee, to bring it to the floor as a rule bill. So they were going to bring it up under suspension, which means they needed to have approximately 290 votes to pass. It failed as well last night. Democrats abandoned the vote. Republicans, 14 of them, I believe, abandoned the vote as well. The bill went down in another defeat, back-to-back defeats on the floor for Speaker Johnson and the leadership team. Both of them going straight up to a whip count issue. Now, you can claim that, now they're going to say Democrats voted against Israel's funding and everything else. Yeah, you can. But you also would have never passed the bill on your own in a rule or in another situation when you lost 14 of your own members. This was, again, Democrats having a good night on the floor. Now, was it show? Yeah, it was show. It was also in retribution for the failure in the Senate this past week. Republicans had equal opportunity flops this week. And so when you have the House losing an impeachment vote, you have the House losing an Israel aid vote with no offsets, and then you have the Senate completely cave in on the bipartisan immigration deal, which, by the way, I'm happy to see happen. It should have never come this far to start with. I've talked to friends of mine who used to work for me and others that worked with, and this was just a disaster. I mean, at every turn, as I had one person who is very familiar with, intimately involved with immigration legislation for the last 25 years, basically said it gets worse with each page. And so I am by no means, encouraging the Senate bill. The Senate bill need to take up HR2 and then deal with it instead of coming up with new and novel activities that in the end gave the Democrats mostly everything that they wanted on the border. It should have never came up. This was another issue of McConnell in his determination to get Ukraine funding and to get other funding out there. It is, blinded to the realities of what's going on in the presidential campaign. Now, some are blaming Donald Trump for killing this bill. He had a voice in saying, like most of us, who said this bill's not good. So, if you want to, blame Donald Trump for killing a bill that most people looked at when they finally looked at it, and people who actually understood immigration looked at and said this is not the solution, then okay. But I think he's just joining the majority of Americans who now realize that immigration is a real issue. Immigration, whether you agree with it or not, is an issue that is driving the presidential races. We've got to deal with this. So when you look at the House and the Senate from last night, the House last night, the Senate for this week have had just completely bad weeks. Some of those kind of weeks when you get up on Monday and it's just better off just to call in sick for the week because it's just not going to get any better. This has been one of those weeks for the House. I want the best for Speaker Johnson. I know Mike personally. He's been on this podcast before. You've heard him. He's a conservative. He is one who really wants to do what is right. But right now he's got an ungovernable majority. And he's not an enviable position. In fact, one of the reasons I think there's not been another call to have a motion to vacate the chair is nobody wants the job. They've watched what has happened. And in the words of Thomas Massey, who is a friend, I've known Thomas for a long time. We disagree on certain things. But, Thomas is very outspoken in his beliefs. And, again, a lot of things I agree with, a lot of things I don't. He put out a tweet earlier today that basically says getting rid of Speaker McCarthy is officially turned into an unmitigated disaster. You can agree with that or disagree with it. But here's what he says. All work on separate spending bills has ceased, which is true. They're not even looking at separate spending bills anymore, by the way. They're just looking at groupings of two. Spending reductions have been traded for spending increases. Warrantless spying has been temporarily extended, and our majority has shrunk. Now, I also will admit the fact that also Thomas Massey voted against some of the bills that could have cut some stuff earlier and actually, had a debt ceiling bill that there's controversy about. But I will say this, Thomas does participate in the system. He does get in, and even on in this year, especially, he's shown his willingness to find solutions. But he's right. When you look at what's going on in the House right now, they're just not doing anything. And for some of you who like to say, oh, well, they're fighting. No, they're not. They're talking. And I love these guys and gals. They're friends, colleagues, former colleagues that I believe can do great things, but they really at the point now have run themselves into a hole in the sense that they've somehow begun to believe that their own conference is the problem, that their own majority is the problem. You can have very conservative beliefs and still get stuff done. You can have even more moderate beliefs and still get stuff done. The question is going to come is, well, are you willing to put in the time and put in the effort to get the 218 votes you need in the House, and then be willing to negotiate with the Senate when they don't want to negotiate, and be able to stand firm? Those are the things that you have to be honest about. So look, the Speaker is, struggling right now. Majority Leader in the Senate, Minority Leader in the Senate, McConnell, is struggling. This is just a bad place for us to be in. But before we turn and we've left Washington, let's turn to the presidential race. The abject failure of the House last night and the Senate for this week have no comparison really until what happened last night in Nevada in the primary. Last night in the Nevada primary, which again did not have Donald Trump on it, because the Nevada GOP, which we forget, and we've talked about this before, it is the GOP's private corporation, if you would, the private selection of GOP delegates to determine who will be delegates to the national convention this summer. That falls within the realm of the state and national GOP. It does not fall within the realm of what the states want to do or anything else. States can determine how they want to elect their caucus or primary, and determine how they want to elect their delegates to the state convention, and how many are allocated any way they want to allocate it. Nevada last year, after some issues came about, they chose to have a primary that was for Republicans and Democrats, but the Nevada GOP said, we're only going to award, however, delegates to the convention through the caucus process, which is a couple of days from now. So, and they said also that if you participate in the primary, you can't participate in the caucus, because they were trying to, again, to get everybody into the caucus where the delegates are formed. Nicki Haley chose to only do the primary because she thought that the Nevada GOP was in the camp of Donald Trump, and others did as well. So they went to the primary process. This was going to be, if there was ever a point, now to Haley's credit, she did not spend a lot of money there. She hadn't spent any time there since, back in the fall. But here's what happened last night. Candidates, only Nicki Haley was an active candidate on the ballot. Mike Pence, Tim Scott, and others were on the ballot in the primary, but again, have long since abandoned their campaigns. Last night, however, Nicki Haley got beat almost 40 points by none of the above, or none of the below, however you want to look at it. In other words, people actually took the time to go out and vote in a Nevada primary for GOP preference, and actually voted in a block that says, we don't want any of these people. She's the only active candidate on the ballot. And yet 40% more people said, and almost 68%, I think it was, 69% said, we don't want any of these. If Nicki Haley's campaign has not got this now, then we understand that this is not about winning the presidency anymore. It's simply about spending donor money and attacking Donald Trump. This is the bottom line truth. This is no longer about, you're going to win in South Carolina. You're not going to win in South Carolina. You're not. Your own polling tells you that. If you're the Haley campaign, you know that you're not. It may be within 20 points, but you're still not going to win it. And 20 points, by the way, is a landslide in elections, especially when there's only two of you basically actively participating. Going into Super Tuesday, you can spend all the money you want, and you will not win on Super Tuesday. The numbers are not there. In fact, the numbers are worse for her in states on Super Tuesday than they are in her home state of South Carolina. So really, the only evidence that you can have right now for the reason for Nicki Haley staying in this race is that she simply wants to continue to bash Donald Trump. Not that she thinks she can win. Not that there's a path for her to win. Say whatever you want to about Donald Trump. Say you don't like him. Say you don't want to be a part of this campaign. Fine. But Donald Trump is going to be the Republican nominee. And for Nicki Haley to stay in this race and continue to do what she's doing, she is simply providing fodder for those who do not like Donald Trump, and for those who, on the Democratic side of the Biden campaign, to use against Donald Trump and other Republican candidates in the fall. Stay in, Nicki, if you want to. I mean, but at this point, the game's over because nobody believes you can win. It's not even a choice anymore. And you've really set yourself up as just being someone who wants to bash Donald Trump. And if that's what you're wanting to do, then, go at it. But the electability of that standpoint, even in 2028, is not very good. So as we look at failures and flops of this week, I've just sort of outlined 3 from last night. The impeachment of Mayorkas, which may get done if they can get their math straight and get Steve Scalise back. They may get Mayorkas done. Senate's already said they'll dismiss it as quickly as possible. You've even got Republicans in the Senate, being willing to agree to dismiss it as soon as possible because they don't want to go through with it. So we know where that's going to happen. All right. The funding bill for Israel is now dead. Schumer is going to try and force through a bill for Ukraine, Israel, and everybody else without the border piece. The border piece failed and should have failed without even being a vote in the Senate. I feel sorry for James Langford. He was put into an unenviable, unwielding task, and it didn't work out. And what he came up with, should have gotten some more input from other people going forward to try and negotiate this because it was a bad bill. And then last night you had Nicki Haley get beat by none of the above, by 40 points. Pretty amazing week for Republicans. I mean, I'm looking forward to Donald Trump winning in November. I'm looking forward to Republicans winning in November and taking the Senate and doing everything we can to keep the House in full control of the Republicans. Ronna McDaniel is supposedly going to be out now after the South Carolina primary, which is in a couple of weeks. Again, we've got to get our act together because Joe Biden's team is piling money. They're piling money. They're piling money, and they have their constituencies. And this is going to be a long, long general election campaign. These things, though, hurt when you look at it from an overall perspective. Can we overcome it? Sure. But it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of time. Before we go, though, I do have to do a shout out to Toby Keith. Toby Keith passed away this week as someone who served in the Iraq War. Toby Keith was very active with USO. He was very active with songs that many of us know, going forward should have been a cowboy, but he also is red, white, and blue. American soldier, which meant a lot to many of us who served. I just raised my red Solo cup up to Toby Keith in his memory. God bless him. He meant a lot to many people, and especially to country music. And with that, I'll let it go with some of his music, and we will see you next time on Friday's Finest with Chip and James on Friday. Y'all take care.